In your paper, you used dappled as if it means rainy. It doesn't mean that. It means more like splashed with light.
But dappled sounds like the sound rain makes. That's why I used it. I like dappled.
But dappled doesn't mean rainy. You can't just go and arbitrarily change the meaning of a word.
Why not? When I use a word, it means what I want it to mean.
Sounds like Humpty Dumpty in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, who stated,
in a rather scornful tone,
when I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean. Neither more nor less.
Then Alice said,
the question is whether you can make words mean so many different things.
to which Humpty replied, and he was pretty sure of the answer, it seems.
The question is, which is to be master? That's all.
Think of what would happen if everyone imposed arbitrary meanings on words. Words are not your slaves. Actually, we are subject to the words and meanings that people long ago decided to use. As I learned in graduate school, those long ago people attributed a certain meaning to a certain bunch of sounds that were used by human beings in social settings. We agree to these designated meanings. That dictates how we use words. And as W.N. Francis, who was a professor of linguistics, said,
the principal function of language, communication, would break down if everyone insisted on using his own private arbitrary name for things.
Why not just check the dictionary for the synonym of rainy?
Well, that's almost a waste of time, because what do we find there? We just find other words.
Monsoon, torrent, downpour.
Sprinkling, drizzling.
Dabbly and splashy.
See? Other words that are the meaning of the first word. So aren't we just saying that both mean the same thing? What is the other meaning? Why all this fuss over a simple little word?
Well, let's find out. Let's explore. Let's research this topic a bit.
But how do I research a word? It's not as though there are experts who have a lot to say about words.
Oh, you'd be surprised. Linguists, lexicographers, etymologists, literary analysts, and poets may beg to differ.
OMG! I can't read all that!
You're probably right. You have to pick and choose, evaluate your sources, and decide what to use. If you want to learn about how people, writers, choose which word to use in a specific context and use words to shape their ideas, you can read sources that will serve you in different ways. A handbook like a writer's reference suggests a number of functions for different pieces of information you find.
Provide background information.
Explain terms or concepts.
Provide evidence.
Lend authority.
Offer alternative interpretations.
Then once you've found information that you want to include in your explanation of word choice, you have to cite your source.
What does this have to do with seeing? I thought we were talking about talking and writing.
Not cite. Cite. It means you tell the location of where you found your information. You tell the author, the name of the book, and the year it was published, of where you found the quote.
Really? But isn't that a lot of work?
It's sort of a literary way to prove you're not a thief. The handbook explains that written texts are considered an author's property. Look here, it says,
this property isn't a physical object, so it's often referred to as an intellectual property.
The author owns the language as well as any original ideas contained in the writing.
When you use another author's property in your own writing, you need to follow certain conventions for citing the material. Because if you don't,
Dun, dun, dun.
You risk committing plagiarism.
That means if you don't show you got those ideas from someone else, you've stolen those ideas and claimed them as your own.
So when you decide what information to use from a source, you have to acknowledge that you have borrowed those words and ideas by using quotation marks. Look, it says,
even if you partially copy the author's sentences, either by mixing the author's phrases with your own without using quotation marks, or by plugging your synonyms into the author's sentence structure, you are committing plagiarism, a serious academic offense.
You don't want to commit a serious academic offense, do you? Here, try this on for size.
Okay.
So, tell me, what did you discover about words?
Well, I was surprised. Quite a bit. Check this out. What is a word? The Literacy Dictionary, edited by T.L. Harris and R.E. Hodges, lists a number of definitions by various wordsmiths.
Noun, a key language unit of meaning.
Noun, the smallest lexical unit of meaning.
Noun, the smallest unit of grammar that can stand alone as a complete utterance.
Or more elaborately from a different source.
Noun, a speech, sound, or series of speech sounds that symbolizes and communicates a meaning without being divisible into smaller units capable of independent use.
Which adds up to this observation made by Edmund Burke Huey way back in 1908.
Words are functional, and their main function is to help express a total meaning which implies their association together with other words.
John Girardi is a poet, but he wrote a whole book on how poets choose words to use in their writing called How Does a Poem Mean? He agrees that words are distinct units, but also are
forever shaping themselves into rhythmic phrases in which the words themselves become parts of a larger unit.
In his book, Girardi tells us that
A word is a history.
And as I understand from what else I read, it has a heritage. He says, and I quote, "Languages die, but words
Tend to be immortal. Some words disappear after a brief run, but many become established parts of the language, and once so established, they persist. Like the stones of an ancient ruin, the words fall out of their original organization, but survive to be used again. There's hardly a tenement hovel in the old section of modern Rome that was not built in part with stones from ancient ruins. There's hardly a phrase in a modern American's vocabulary that has not been built up from pieces falling out of other languages."
Luis Urrea discussed building the English language from pieces of other languages in his novel, Nobody's Son.
I saw a hand-lettered sign on television. It was held up by a woman in stretch pants and curlers, and it said, "America for Americans." A nearby man held up a sign exhorting the universe to speak English or go home.
Well, sure, we speak English. It's all English, except for alligator, which is a Spanish word. Lariat, too, is a Spanish word.
Here's a brief list in no particular order. All words borrowed from Spanish.
Savvy coyote marijuana vamoose.
Adobe, cigar, alfalfa, calaboose.
Patio Nevada guacamole ranch.
Chocolate, vanilla, fandango, buckaroos.
How will we get rid of all these pesky foreign words debilitating the United States?
Those Turkish words.
Like coffee.
French words.
Like maroon.
Greek words.
Like cedar.
African words.
Like marimba.
Danish,
Twerp,
Latin,
adolescent,
Scottish,
feckless,
Eskimo,
kayak.
seersucker, sandalwood, abbot, and zombies.
Persian, Sanskrit, Aramaic, Caribbean.
I'm beginning to get it. I'm beginning to like words. I see what Urrea is getting at when he says,
Thank God so many people lend us theirs, or we'd be forced to point and grunt. I comfort myself in these words. I know how much color and beauty the others really add to the American mix.
Girardi continues to explore the concept of a word by explaining,
An awareness of the word's history eventually identifies the word's meaning in terms of
A root picture.
or root metaphor. This picture-making power is an indispensable function in determining the feel of a word.
Girardi basically says there's a noise socially agreed upon for a basic definition, and just beyond it is an image for which that noise is derived.
Moonlight.
Aster.
Godspeed.
Supercilious.
Welcome.
My love is like a red, red rose.
Wise as an owl.
Mad as a hatter.
As soon as you think about this picture behind the word, there are no synonyms anymore. Words are individuals, with their own history, with their own locked-in picture. For the person who is language sensitive, every word has its own personality.
A third quality of words I learned from Girardi is that
A word involves the muscles.
Peter
knows
Piper
seashells
picked up
by the
Peter
seashore.
Piper
Seashells.
picked up
Seashells.
Peter
She
Piper
sells the
Peter
seashells by
Piper
the
picked up
seashore.
Peter
Girardi says in his book, an inseparable
but special part of the feeling of words lies in the fact that they have to be produced by a human body, which involves breath and muscles, and various kinds of muscular activity tend to produce various kinds of feeling. Thus, the bodily involvement in sounding the words is a distinct part of the word's personality.
Elate feels one way.
and happy feels another.
Clunk feels one way.
And thud feels another.
This seems to be the message expressed by another writer, Mary Gordon, who said,
I hear things in a kinesthetic way. I tap into a rhythm of language to portray what I feel.
and captured in the cadence of familiar poetry.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear the midnight ride of Paul Revere.
Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?
This aspect of words, of language, the rhythm, the beat, their ability to allow one to feel the words kinesthetically, reminds me of something I heard just the other day on National Public Radio. It was a piece called Winston Churchill's Way with Words by Tom Vitale, and it was all about how Churchill was able to fortify and inspire an entire nation in a time of despair. Vitale cited Andrew Roberts, author of A History of World War II, entitled The Storm of War, who wrote,
Winston Churchill managed to combine the most magnificent use of English, usually short words, Anglo-Saxon words, Shakespearean words, and also the incredibly powerful delivery. And he did it at a time when the world was in such peril from Nazism that every word mattered.
Vitale also tracked how Churchill understood the power of words. Churchill had written an essay, an unpublished manuscript, as a 23-year-old soldier entitled The Scaffolding of Rhetoric, saying,
The climax of oratory is reached by a rapid succession of waves of sound and vivid pictures.
And Vitale evoked John F. Kennedy, who praised Churchill during an interview in April 1963, emphasizing the power of words and Churchill's ability to build his message.
In the dark days and darker nights when England stood alone, he mobilized the English language and sent it into battle.
The rhythm of words, the power of words, the feeling of words. Which brings us to Chardy's last quality of a word, that it is
A feeling.
Sure, words have dictionary definitions, but meaning goes beyond mere definitions, beyond the identifying function of a word, beyond a reference or a designated label. Giardi uses the word rat as an example, and now I'm paraphrasing. It's the label that identifies a rodent, bigger than a mouse, and differentiated from that little creature by its tooth structure. But what did Jimmy Cagney's gangster character mean when he called someone a rat?
You dirty rat.
Or when you get angry at someone for ratting on you. Man, the language animal not only invents words as labels,
Denotations.
but tends to associate the word with the thing it labels.
Connotations.
Most people, according to Ciardi, think of rats as despicable, vicious, and filthy. So the word takes on that feel. Jimmy Cagney's character wasn't at all concerned with the zoological classifications of a rat. He dropped the denotation in order to use its connotation. This is exactly what Staggerberg and Anderson were talking about when they wrote in their book, Poetry as Experience.
Words are not used in isolation, but in human situations. It is through our experiences with them. But as we experience words in human situations, they acquire individual flavors. They come to have an emotive tone, the associations of the situation of which they have been a part.
So after all this, what do you have to say about words? What conclusions do you draw?
Well, there's this idea that seems to capture the importance of words, how they're such a foundation for our communication and for our very being. It was conceived by the Russian linguist Lev Vygotsky that said,
Thought is not merely expressed in words, it comes into existence through them.
as James Britton notes, my ideas abound to my words. So I need to think about my words before I use them, and I need to appreciate what is contained in those simple little lexical units of meaning.
I want to share with others that words, one word after another, one rhythmic phrase after another, has brought us literature.
Has given us the ability to understand ourselves and our world.
The ability to express our thoughts.
To awaken a response within ourselves.
And that people preserve these words and return to these words because they find them valuable.
I want people to believe what Brin asserts, that we neglect expressive language only at our peril, for it is how we develop our soul.
Doing this research, discovering the meaning of a simple word, makes me realize the significance of Susan Woolridge's book, that through language, you are freeing your life with words.